Hi, I'm Chris Ortega, and today I'm going to show you the integration of Qlik Data Catalyst with Qlik Cloud Services. And there are two ways of moving data from on-prem to Qlik Cloud Services. The first that we'll go through is to move a QVD to your personal data files by shopping the catalog and doing a one-click transfer of that QVD up to QCS. And then for any data file, whether it's a QVD or an entity within the catalog, what we will do is use the publish module to move that information as a QVD, regardless of its source type, up to Qlik Cloud Services, leveraging the publish module in a QVD format. So what I've got is a running instance of Qlik Data Catalyst in this tab. And in this tab, I've connected to my tenant on Qlik Cloud Services. What I'm going to do now is move data to Qlik Cloud Services from Data Catalyst. And in this case, I'm going to take a QVD and add it to my data files on Qlik Cloud Services. So the first thing I'll do is search for my QVDs. And I've now got a list of the available QVDs in the catalog. And if I go to Sense, just to show you on Cloud Services, I'll go to my app and I'll go to the Add Data tab. And you'll notice I have my data files here. I've also established an S3 connection to a bucket, but we're going to be talking about my data files first. And you'll see I have nothing here. So what I'm going to do is select one of these. In this case, I'll take bed occupancy, add it to my cart, and I'll take action. And you'll notice at the bottom of this dropdown now, I have the option to publish to my QCS data files. This will work with my QVD and push that up to Qlik Cloud Services. So what you'll notice is if I go back in here, I now have bed occupancy QVD here and can begin to work with that. Now, the way that this works is that within Data Catalyst, what I've done is I've mapped my user here by looking at my profile to my account on Qlik Cloud Services by generating a QCS user token on Qlik Cloud Services. I've copied and pasted that token into here. So what we're doing is we're leveraging the Qlik's data file service in order to move this data. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move either QVD or more importantly, non-QVD data sets to QCS using the publish module. And what that will allow us to do, besides reconcile the native data format, QVD or non-QVD, but it will also allow us to schedule these jobs. So the first thing I'll do is I'll show you in QDC that we have a target here that we have set up called QCS Training Bucket, which references Qlik Cloud Services, which is configured, the tenant and all of that is configured within the CoreAnv properties file. But what we've done is we've granted access to certain S3 buckets here and assigned them to groups. So if you don't have access to the bucket based upon your QDC group, and these should align with QCS as well, you won't have the ability to write to those buckets. So we have a bucket here, QDC training, that we're going to write to. And if I close this, what I'll also show you is on the QCS side, that I've added an S3 connection to that bucket. So I'm in the add data page and you'll see I've got the contents here, and QDC generated objects will show up here with a prefix of QDC. So you'll see I have no QDC objects here. So what I'm going to do is go back to my catalog And what I've done is I have searched for a particular source, in this case TPCH, where I have a customer file with 1,500 rows, and I've got all this great catalog profile information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add that to my cart. And now when I take action, rather than publishing to my QCS data files, I'm going to actually use the publish framework. And what I'll do is set up a data set name. And for target here, I'm going to choose that QCS training bucket. When I click next, I am asked for a couple of things. Which data do I want to send over? Do I want to send all loads of the data, the latest load, specific ones? I'm going to choose to send the latest load. And now, based on those permissions, I have access to only one of those two buckets, the QDC training bucket. So I'm going to choose that. I click next. I schedule this. I can set this up as a recurring schedule or a one-time immediate, which I'm going to do a one-time immediate in this case. And when I click next, I'm brought to this screen. I have some fields here that are marked as sensitive, so those will be obfuscated when written out. And when I click next and actually save this, it's going to now run this job. It's created the job, and if I look at the log details, I can see that the job is running. And if I pull this for updates, we can see what it's actually doing. So right now, what it's done is it's taken that data and generated a QVD file for it. And as well, it's generated sample data as well as the profile data for transfer to QCS. And so what we'll see is now that that job has finished, what we can do is toggle over to QCS. And if I I'll click here. And what I'll see here is that I now have in this S3 bucket, I have something that is prefixed by QDC. The source is TPCH SF001, and the entity is customer. And underneath that, I have my QVD, which is the customer data. But I've also got the profiling data. So I've got all that rich profiling data. I've got sample data, and I've got that customer data in a QVD format. So in this way, I'm able to work with this information. So between the two mechanisms, either moving something to your own data files in a one-click fashion, taking a QVD in the catalog and getting it up to your data files. You can do that. If you have access to an S3 bucket, you can take any data and make it available in QCS as a QVD. Again, this was Chris Ortega, the product manager for Qlik Data Catalyst. I hope you enjoyed this brief demo. Thank you.